Iqaluit. We begin tonight in the Yukon. A lawsuit against the Trump administration has been rebooted this week. It seeks to protect Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil and gas leasing. 13 Canadian and American organizations first sued the Trump administration in 2020. The lawsuit was paused after the Biden administration took steps to protect the refuge. In the fall, Trump reopened the area to oil and gas leasing, reigniting a decades-long fight. Tori Fitzpatrick has more.
The lawsuit claims opening the coastal plain to oil and gas leasing violates several laws. The coastal plain is home to the porcupine caribou herd's calving grounds, and the herd is a source of food for many northern communities. Now, the Gwich'in Steering Committee is one of the organizations involved in the suit. It says opening the coastal plain to oil and gas leasing threatens its way of life. The Trump administration conducted an environmental assessment during its first term. Now, the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, Yukon, one of the other organizations involved in the suit, says that process was flawed. And despite opposition from many groups, some local Inupiat leaders in Alaska have previously expressed support for oil and gas leasing. There are currently 7 active leases in the refuge, but some experts say that oil companies are unlikely to bid on them. That's because lawsuits like this one could keep them in court for years. Tori Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Whitehorse.
In the Northwest Territories, a lawyer for the Lutselk'e Dene First Nation say it can pursue fraud allegations against one of Canada's largest accounting firms. He says this week's court ruling sets an important precedent. The CBC's Avery Zingle reports.
A lawyer for Lutselk'e Dene First Nation says a court ruling allows them to go after KPMG in court for its alleged role in defrauding them of more than $10 million. The First Nation says accounting giant KPMG helped former Dennisutlaneg CEO Ron Barlas to siphon money from their business arm. KPMG asked the court to send this dispute to private arbitration and to rely on contracts that Barlas set up. The Northwest Territories Supreme Court says those contracts were instrumental to Barlas's fraudulent scheme, and the matter belongs in open court. A lawyer for Lutselk'e Dene First Nation says corporations are no longer guaranteed private arbitration, especially when a First Nation is exploited and defrauded.
But in this case, Lutselk'e had no knowledge of the contract, and the contract was clearly being weaponized by Barlas to prevent the community from finding out what was going on with the financials in the corporation. Barlas's actions, his conduct, the deals that he entered into, the contracts that he fraudulently got the community to enter into, all work against the interests of the community, and we say the interests of justice. And the court agreed.
Starting in 2016, Barlas devised a web of contracts to gain control of Lutselk'e's business arm. He hired a KPMG accountant he personally knew out of Langley, BC. Lutselk'e alleges KPMG prepared inaccurate and misleading financial statements. In 2019, omitting $1.3 million in payments benefiting Barlas. It says lawyers from Edmonton law firm Reynolds, Mirth, Richards & Farmer drafted contracts that shielded Barlas from scrutiny or removal. They accuse KPMG of negligence, breach of contract, and fiduciary duty. Both KPMG and the law firm say they'll defend against the allegations in court. Larry Innes says Lutselk'e is taking both of them to court to get the money back.
Lutselk'e is not alone in being taken advantage of by unscrupulous operators. And Indigenous communities across the country who are at the sharp end of these types of contracts have up until now had little resort. I think it sends a very clear message to corporate Canada, to the big sophisticated actors who are dealing with Indigenous communities from a position of power, that may be well and good, but when it comes to frauds and other forms of misdoings, the courts will look beyond the black letter law of the contract and to the equity of the situation.
Another trial will determine just how much money Lutselk'e Dene First Nation lost. Evidence presented in court to date suggests that the fraud could be in excess of $11 million. Avery Zingle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A former CBC employee is suing the public broadcaster, alleging he was subjected to a toxic work environment. Carl Johnston worked in the Human Resources Department of CBC's Yellowknife Bureau between 2018 and 2023. He filed the lawsuit in the Supreme Court of the Northwest Territories. The lawsuit alleges Johnson witnessed discrimination against disabled and Indigenous people as hiring practices, and claims Johnson was pressured to return to work early after going on a short-term disability following surgery. CBC's head of public affairs, Chuck Thompson, said the broadcaster disputes the allegations and intends to defend against the suit. None of the allegations have been proven in court. Huluk Energy Corporation provided an update today on a recent break-in at its corporate office in Iqaluit. It says some customer records may have been accessed, but there is still no evidence that customer information has been misused. QAC is encouraging Iqaluit customers to pre-authorize payments to review their bank or credit card statements. The company is offering free credit monitoring and identify protection services to people impacted. It says it's taken steps to further protect customer data. RCMP are still investigating. Still in the news, a woman who's lived in the Northwest Territories all her life says she has no choice but to leave. We first heard Cindy Nitsiza's story in the fall after she and her partner were given an eviction notice. As Devin Shrudenik reports, now they're packing up for Alberta.
Sydney Nitsiza goes through pictures she managed to save after a fire in her old unit at Franklin House Apartments last May.
The hat, this is my hat, and this is my other son's hat.
Nitsiza and her partner were moved to a different unit after the fire, but now they have to leave while the building is renovated. They've been looking for somewhere else to stay in Yellowknife, but they only managed to get on a waiting list for public housing. Nitsiza says she's been homeless before and never wants to go back to that, so they're headed to Alberta to live in an in-laws trailer.
Here, where we're going to go? Where we're going to go? We're going to be on the street again?
Peter Adorian is a lawyer who has been representing Nitsiza and her partner. He says her situation was predictable. They were failed twice by their landlord and a lack of supports in Yellowknife.
If somebody is facing eviction, even when it's for no fault of their own, there is just nowhere else to go. And the social safety net does not seem to be capable of catching people who are falling.
Range Lake Developments owns Franklin House Apartments. It's previously told CBC News renovations could take many, many months to complete. Devin Shrudenik, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Cambridge Bay residents are eagerly waiting for a new youth center. The old one burned down in 2022, and for years it left youth with no community space to hang out. CBC's Samuel Watt has that story.
It may be a school night in Cambridge Bay, but that doesn't mean it'll be a quiet one.
Did you wash your hands?
Kids are busy at the youth centre, baking, playing games, and just kicking back.
I like the most of the mini couches, the mini ones.
10-year-old Dom Masagak drops into the youth centre most nights. This is a temporary space though. It opened up 3 months ago. The previous centre, which was bigger, burnt down in 2022, leaving kids with no dedicated space to hang out at night.
Youth kind of were lost, walking around, getting into trouble, not doing so great.
Which is why these community spaces are so important. If you weren't here at the youth centre, where would you be hanging out?
On the couch.
The hamlet is looking at building a new permanent centre. It plans to award a $6 million construction contract next week and hopefully have the facility open by the end of 2027. Some of the youth, like 12-year-old Zuri Tikak, already have visions of what should be in that space.
2 TVs so we can watch movies on one TV and play games on the other TV.
So they have double the things to keep them happy. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Cambridge Bay.
The extreme weather in Dawson City, Yukon has disrupted studies at Robert Service School. First, in mid-December, temperatures dropped into the minus 50s, causing the propane heating to malfunction. The week after the holiday break, a water main broke in 2 places. Students stayed home again and had to do a few days of remote learning. The school's principal told CBC's Ellen Jones it's been hard on students, staff, and parents, but she says everyone learned a lot from the experience.
Well, I thought we might have been ready to learn a bit more. After the one in December, we thought, okay, in January we'll meet and start, get a checklist ready and get that going. But it hit us pretty hard right away when we came back. But having a plan in place beforehand, rather than saying the night before, this is what we're doing, we will have that on hand always now. And I think that's what I've learned. But we're pretty flexible staff, adaptable. Cold weather was already affecting the number of students at school and what we could do. It was exam week this week for high school, so that had to be adapted. So we're pretty, adaptable, resilient.
The students have been back in school since Wednesday. The community of Wee-Quay-Tee, Northwest Territories, is under a boil water advisory. A notice from the Chief Public Health Officer says the community water treatment plant can't properly treat water. A recent power outage caused freezing damage to its infrastructure. Earlier today, the community was asked to conserve power due to the lengthy outage that started yesterday. Power has been fully restored. The notice says boiling drinking water is a precautionary measure.
I'm Suresh Das. I've spent my career writing about the local favorites that make Canada's food scene truly unique. I've never had Nigerian food like this.
If this is where Filipino food is headed, I'm so proud.
From vibrant street food to comforting traditional dishes to innovative personal twists on classics, I believe every bite tells a story. Now, I want to share those stories with you.
Where does bravery live? In Marie-Philippe Poulin, who went from playing in a boys' league to trailblazing a pro-women's league. And in Cynthia Appia, who refuses to let the high cost of sports slow her down. It lives inside Piper and Paul, who use every fall as a chance to bounce back even higher. Where does bravery live? Inside every Canadian, in the moments that define us.
This January on CBC TV.
I am all over this party.
It's officially cancel your plans season.
Get in, put your arms down.
Turn up the heat with unforgettable drama.
Once we do this, there's no going back.
Unstoppable laughs.
Get up.
Family favorites.
Let's play the feud, everybody.
And gripping mysteries.
How gruesome, indeed.
This January, find everything you need to see.
Exactly, for sure.
On CBC TV. And stream anytime on CBC Gem.
I'm heading to the African continent and across the diaspora to speak with activists, artists, athletes. I'm Amanda Paris, always pushing the conversation forward. And this is For the Culture.
The Nunavik Nunavik shipping symposium wrapped up in Iqaluit on Thursday. The CBC's McEwen has more on which issues were on top of mind.
Inuit leaders and hunter and trapper organizations all voiced their concerns with shipping effects on wildlife this week at the Inuit Nunavut Shipping Symposium in Iqaluit. Paul Ukalik is a lawyer with WWF Canada who spoke at the conference. He says the federal government needs to make better policies to protect the waters like it does across the border.
Alaska has robust policies regarding the protection of their environment. If any ship is going to release liquids into their waters, they will be inspected and have to be cleaned. We do not have that here.
At the conference, Pond Inlet residents said they noticed that as the number of ships increase, the narwhal population decreases. Ukulik says ships harm marine mammals and they need to respect the animals' habitat.
The marine mammals swim away from ships. Some animals become deaf from all the noise. Plus, the animals don't communicate as much when ships are around.
Also noticing these impacts on narwhal is Oceans North. It has monitored Pond Inlet with the Hunter and Trappers organization for the past 12 years. Amanda Joint is a senior campaign strategist with the organization. She says the data has been used for the impact assessment process for the Mary River mine, and papers have been presented on this issue.
That show that there are impacts to narwhal that we didn't think were there initially. It helps us understand that Inuit knowledge has been very clear that narwhal have been affected by shipping noise to a greater degree than initially thought.
Oceans North has also installed 6 underwater microphones to track how shipping noise affects wildlife.
Shipping is a lot more than just vessels going through the water. It's ocean noise, its impacts to food security and Inuit harvesting rights and Inuit culture. And we need to, when we're trying to manage shipping in the Arctic, we need to keep that in mind.
Bianca McEwen, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Thank you, CBC's Bianca McEwen, for that story. Residents of Nunavik are reacting to the resignation of Quebec Premier François Legault. Legault announced he would leave the role on Wednesday. The legal representative for Inuit in the region says there's a feeling of uncertainty. Makivik Corporation had been working with Legault on a self-determination agreement that involves the creation of Nunavik self-government. Makivik's president says it would allow for Inuit to control their own destiny in the region and be in charge of the projects that take place there. With Legault resignation, it's unclear what will happen next.
And I was hoping that we'll be able to reach some kind of an agreement on the self-determination negotiations that we've been going on for the last couple of years. Unfortunately, with his resignation, that's probably will put a hold on this.
Atami says Legault's resignation is a loss. He wants any future government to work with Makivik as equals. Nunavut's premier says the territory is standing in solidarity with Greenland. The U.S. President Donald Trump continues his threats to take over the island. John Main says the territory has a lot in common with Greenland, from geography to culture, background, and history. He also says Nunavut has an existing agreement with Greenland that outlines their working relationship with a focus on fisheries, ports, education, and culture. Main says his government is keeping a close eye on the situation as it unfolds.
There are partners in terms of shared interests. And so looking at recent news regarding interest in Greenland, it's deeply concerning.
Trump threatened Friday to place tariffs on countries that don't support his plan to take over Greenland. The latest threats come as a group of bipartisan U.S. lawmakers visited Denmark in an effort to ease tensions. The 11-member group met with various members of parliament, including both the Danish and the Greenland prime ministers. Trump has repeatedly stated that the United States need Greenland for its security, and has said that the U.S. would get it, quote, the easy way or the hard way. Denmark has warned that any aggressive action would signal the end of NATO. A major breakthrough coming out of China. Prime Minister Mark Carney has made what he calls landmark deal, one that resets bilateral relations between the two countries. The CBC's Ashley Burke is in Beijing with the details.
The Right Honorable Mark Carney.
After a meeting with China's president, Mark Carney announcing a breakthrough.
Today, Canada and China have reached a preliminary but landmark trade agreement to remove trade barriers and reduce tariffs.
The Prime Minister telling business leaders it's the start of a new era with Beijing.
Canada now has set the goal of doubling our exports to China by the end of this decade.
Welcome.
Chinese President Xi Jinping says there's been a turnaround in relations. Carney says China is agreeing to drop tariffs on Canadian canola meal, lobster, crab, and peas, and lowering tariffs hitting Canadian canola seed to about 15% by March.
This change represents a significant drop from the current combined tariff levels of 84%.
But no movement on pork or canola oil. In return, Carney agreeing to diverge from the United States, slashing a 100% tariff on up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles entering Canada, a move that could upset Ontario's hard-hit auto sector.
We're returning to the levels of Chinese automobiles as a cap that we had 2 years ago. So that's less than 3% of the Canadian auto sectors.
After this tariff deal, Carney asked if he now sees China as a more predictable partner than the United States.
The one comparison I will give you with the United States, our relationship, this is no insight, is much more multifaceted, much deeper, much broader than it is with China. But yes, in terms of the way that our relationship has progressed in recent months with China, it is more predictable.
Less than a year ago, Carney called China the biggest threat to Canada's security. Now he says Canada faces many threats in the world, but it's his job to manage them. The Prime Minister also says that he stands up for human rights, but the government takes the world as it is, not how it wishes it could be. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Beijing.
The Federal Court of Appeal ruled Friday that the Liberal government did not have reasonable grounds to invoke the Emergencies Act in 2022. At the time, it was a controversial move aimed at cooling convoy protests in Ottawa. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovic has more on the decision.
After a month of horns blaring and trucks blocking traffic in downtown Ottawa, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded to the 2022 convoy protest in a big way.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act,
authorizing the first ever use of extraordinary, albeit temporary, powers to end the blockade.
Hold the line! Hold the line!
Hold that line!
You must leave. You will be arrested.
Demonstrators assembled against the public health response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and new vaccination requirements for cross-border truckers were removed and arrested.
Freedom!
Some saw their bank accounts frozen.
Certainly, it was a sad day for Canadians when that happened.
Civil liberty groups launched a legal challenge.
Governments tend to panic and they overreact.
The federal court found Ottawa's use of special powers unreasonable, and now the Federal Court of Appeal has agreed.
I think the lesson here is that we need courts and the rule of law to keep our governments in check.
The appeals court found Cabinet didn't have reasonable grounds to believe a threat to national security existed and failed to exhaust all options before invoking the never-before-used measures.
What this means is that there is now some guidance and some clarity about how those powers to suspend people's civil liberties and fundamental freedoms, how those powers can be used.
Ottawa says it will take time to review the ruling before determining whether to seek an appeal at Canada's highest court.
We'll reserve judgment on the path forward until we have the opportunity to make a considered decision on that issue.
If the case does head to the Supreme Court of Canada, it would set a precedent on the use of the Emergencies Act and mark the final step in this legal battle that civil liberties groups say they're ready for. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
In the Northwest Territories, the Clecho government is hosting dog sledding days. It's part of Health and Wellness Initiative. The CBC's Tamara Merritt went to Yukon to check it out.
It was really nice. It was like a little bumpy, and it was fun.
The Clecho government is running several dog sledding events this winter. The first one was on Thursday in Betchiko. The government's Healing and Community Wellness Department is running the event. It's a way to bring families together and participate in cultural activities.
Dog sledding is very important. It's part of our cultural culture, how people used to survive on the land with just dogs with no actual vehicles and stuff. So this will actually give us more experience that how people used to travel with dog sleds, going back and forth, carrying stuff. The transportation of all will be actually to show other kids and other parents that how the actual dog sledding was back in the olden days.
Some of the kids have never been on a dog sled before, and many braved the wind and freezing temperatures to take part. For a lot of them, the experience was thrilling.
At first they were quiet, and once the dogs started going and they quit barking and they're content to run, they all started laughing and screaming, and they were happy, yeah.
There was more dog sledding planned for Friday in Bechico. The events will be held in other communities like Wekwati and Gamati. Tamara Merritt, CBC News, Yellowknife.
That is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/north. I'm Ila Kakazaktaktu. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.